Where Loyalties Lie by Loyalliar. Chapter 17, 18, and 19. Epilogue. Part 1. The Incident Report. Celestia glanced to the side of the little bundle scroll that fizzled beside her head. She claimed it with her magic and glanced up to the rafters. The commander's absence still felt strange, given how much of his life he dedicated to sitting in that spot. She spread her wings and slouched back in her throne, accompanying the motion with slow, long breath. Only in total solitude did she dare commit an act of such bare and obvious fatigue, so she might have acknowledged the need in the commander's presence. Even stranger than his specific absence was that there was no pony else around. The broken remnants of the honor guard were in no shape to defend their princess. Marathon was out carrying messages for signing armor. White Flag and Mirror Image had yet to return from their respective missions. After those three, only Thundercrack remained both alive and loyal. Celestia had to admire his stubbornness, trying to stand guard beside her with a shattered wing that was still barely attached to his body, alongside a myriad of less threatening cuts and bruises. He'd argued that she needed some pony present if she were going to open the castle to petitions. It was impossible to perfectly check every pony coming in, and the risk would be too high after recent events. Celestia agreed, and simply declared today's petitions for the 10th day in a row. She then ordered him back into his room in the infirmary for rest. After that, there was only the occasional servant to peek in on her. She hadn't come to the enormous room for any official business. Honestly, her purpose had been to stare up at the missing space between the statues and contemplate what Equestria had lost to save her sister. But there was the letter in her grip, still begging for her attention. Reflection could wait. The parchment unfurled without protest. Princess Celestia, I got your letter here in Ponyville, courtesy of Spike, so here's hoping the response reaches you just as easily. I rolled out the report you requested with me, with more than a little bit of editing from Twilight. But it's on a different paper, so I hope it reaches you well. It isn't perfect, but it does contain all the information I have access to. If not, let me know, and I'll see about having a copy delivered. I'm sure you already know some of this material quite well, but it might help you to refresh you if you had been staggered by the after effects of this as much as I have. In any case, I made this small edit so you requested. In response to your questions about Rainbow Dash, she seems as good as any pony could possibly expect. She's a tough mare, although given what's happened, her desire for space seems completely understandable. She didn't want to speak to me very much, but I did offer her an invitation to the funeral, though we still need a formal date. In any case, she actually swore at me when I said we'd be burying the commander. I'm not actually totally sure I understand why, but when I brought up corporal reckoning, she relented. I do note, however, that she asked if you would be there. I told her that was probably to be expected. She told me to tell you that she didn't want to talk to you there. I know you probably didn't want to hear that at all, but I imagine it's better that you know than you try to talk to her and, well, I guess I'm not in much of a position to be giving you advice on other feelings, am I? As for nicer matters, I got a letter from Cadence today. She knew Mark would head it down, so she'll be joining us then as well. My shoulder is healing wonderfully, to be honest, and I should be back to Camelot in 2 days' time at most. However, Twilight has been unbelievably helpful in managing the guard and getting every pony back to their regular posts. I wish I had some pony half as confident around. I might actually be able to see the surface of my desk some days. I've kept a few of my investigators and scouts searching for Soldier On, but given my experience with her, as you'll find in the report, I doubt that she'd be as much of a threat to Equestria as a whole. I do have one request for you, though, Princess. I assume some pony told you about the civilian I brought into the palace with severe burns. She's a very important contact of mine, and I want to make sure she gets the best treatment possible. I understand that it would have been more appropriate to take her to a real hospital, but given that you had the best doctors at Camelot all gathering in the palace infirmary to begin with, I decided that it would be best to get her healed. Last I heard, however, she was still in critical condition. I can't help but feel responsible for her injuries, so I ask you to please do your best and take care of her. If any expensive treatments are required, I will gladly cover their costs. Also, thank you for erasing Commander's records for me. Though it took Twilight, Spike, and I almost a full day to get them arranged in something resembling order, they did fill in several holes, particularly with Soldier On. Unfortunately, he seems to have spent as much time refining reports as he did organizing them. None. Either that, or he kept a large portion of them somewhere else. There are enormous periods where he simply didn't keep record of any events at all, particularly around Princess Luna's return. Regardless, thank you, Princess. I think we might finally be making progress. Captain Armor, Royal Guard. Equestria Royal Guard Case Summary and Record. Incident 0424-DP96. Compiled by Captain Shining Armor with commentary by Deputy Twilight Sparkle. Of A Nightmare Shown. To whichever of my successors may read this, I hope you can forgive the title. When I asked my younger sister about the earliest events of this enormous fiasco, she insisted I attach a mystery novel title. Deputy Sparkle here. That's so much fun to write, transcribing and assisting Captain Armor's report. Normally, at this point, you'd be reading a list of victims, charges, and dates, but due to both the excessive time and staggering quantity of serious crimes committed, I feel the narrative does a better job of explaining the issues. On June 14th, 1452 AS, a fluctuation was reported in the Changeling detention matrix constructed around the Carolot Palace by 2nd Lieutenant White Flag, Honor Guard, and 2nd Sergeant Mirror Image, Honor Guard. What little records the Honor Guard keeps to indicate that due to the absence of both mages, Captain Steel Lining, Honor Guard, reported to the site, the upper access hallway connecting Princess Luna's observatory to her quarters. Though this is speculation at the moment, this is likely at the time at which Masquerade killed Captain Lining and replaced him by donning Captain Hurricane's armor. Thanks to who's ever reading this for the scratch work, but I'm taking this down as a dictation with a quill with Sarswirl's illuminating detection, which tries to record exactly what is said aloud. As such, I had to go back and cross things out because Captain Armor keeps calling this Captain Lightning the commander. Princess Celestia reports that starting around that date, the Captain Lightning began to take frequent leaves from his position as her bodyguard, ordering First Lieutenant Morningstar to fill the position. She reports further that this does not arouse suspicion for her or the Honor Guard, because such activity was regular for the commander. Captain Lining's nickname that I can't seem to stop using in times of danger, and such as immediately prior to the Nightmare Moon incident, during the Blizzard Revolution in Stalingrad, and during the Griffin Border Crisis in Sabrika. I remember him acting like this from when I used to live in the palace with Princess Celestia. I never knew him very well, of course. In fact, this is the first time I ever heard his name. Nevertheless, it's certainly not hard for me to believe the princess didn't suspect anything. From that point, things remained quiet in the palace until August 1st, when Royal Canterlot Academy's Arcane Studies Award Ceremony, or the Nabel Prizes as they are colloquially known, Masquerade, still in the guise of Captain Lining, summoned me to his office. I was informed of a threat, but advised that it was likely against my sister or one of her friends. She even went so far as to suggest that some pony attacking one of the princesses was a ridiculous notion. Given, seemingly, valid evidence, combined with fear from my sister, I focused my attention on the threat that had been presented. Magus Twilight Sparkle, my sister, traveled to Canterlot later that day, accompanied by her Pegasus friend Rainbow Dash, due to the failure of the local train system. I left them in Princess Celestia's care and returned to my work hunting for this potential danger. At approximately 4 p.m., Rainbow Dash was advised to visit Princess Luna in the hopes of challenging her to a race. Instead, Rainbow Dash prevented a first attempt on Luna's life, trying to poison her with Gilded Lotus, a highly poisonous plant found natively in Suida. The butler who delivered the poison in Princess Luna's tea informed the young mayor that the beverage had been delivered by Lieutenant Starr, suggesting he was the traitor. In fact, an autopsy of Lieutenant Starr's body determined that he had been killed by suffocation. Mana burns directly on his lungs indicate the cause of death was arcana, occurring approximately 12 hours prior to this event. Thankfully, at Princess Luna's urging, Rainbow came to me rather than trying to confront the supposed traitor. Knowing that Lieutenant Starr alleged treason would be within Captain Lining's purview, I ordered extra security for the night's event and palace as a whole, but decided not to intervene myself. Instead, it seemed obvious to me, based on the false information Masquerade had provided, that we were looking at a conspiracy, and that Lieutenant Starr had not acted alone. Based on this information, I took Rainbow Dash to accompany me as we visited a contact of mine. It took some time to locate her, but by 6:30 p.m., Rainbow and I identified Going Solo, a small-time drug dealer in the central domain of Canterlot. After a short altercation with Rainbow, Solo was able to inform me that she had sold a full lethal dose of whisper salt, ordering it in small doses, likely to avoid suspicions of its use as lethal poison. A rough description was provided for a mare who, in retrospect, matched Masquerade, along with the location I would expect to find her. If she had access to rare poisons like Gilded Lotus and Fade Seeds, why buy whisper salt from a drug dealer? Research shows that even in cases of overdose, it only has a 17% fatality rate. Maybe she didn't actually want to kill some pony. Oh, Shining says she probably used it to capture Lightning alive and kill him later. I wonder why she would want that, though. By the time we reached the site, it was almost 7 p.m. Expecting danger, I ordered Rainbow to remain outside. It took some time coaxing her to agree, and I entered the structure. Almost immediately, I was met with a rather obvious trapdoor leading downward into the building. I investigated this hidden basement, until another pony struck in from behind and accosted me. Though this pony appeared to be Lieutenant Star, I now believe it to have been Masquerade under the disguise of her illusory magic. Given her apparent lack of military training, her hoof-to-hoof fighting skills were excellent. I took a shod blow to the face, and a second to the neck that drew blood. Despite this, as Masquerade was unwilling to reveal herself by using Arcana, I had the advantage. It was during this battle that Rainbow Dash intervened. Her distraction gave me a clear shot, which I believe had killed Lieutenant Star. Meanwhile, after a short break to eat with Rainbow Dash, I staunched my wound and made my way to the Royal Academy in order to provide further protection for both my sister and the princesses. Seeing the obvious threat ended, I gave Rainbow Dash my badge along with directions to report to the events to the commander. When I arrived at 7:47 p.m., I found the commander present, and I simply assumed that Rainbow would learn he had left the palace and returns directly to us. I further decided that making the princesses and my sister aware of the security issue would be unnecessary and inappropriate. Nearly triple the usual detail of guards ponies had arrived at the site, watching the crowd from the convenient battlements of the former castle that had become the academy. Instead, I sat through the opening speeches, keeping my eyes open for trouble. During this time, Princess Luna took to the sky over the audience, dramatically calling forth the night stars. Nothing went wrong until Rainbow returned from the palace at 8:12, obviously concerned. She almost immediately attacked the commander and was quickly subdued. Thankfully, Princess Celestia's cooler head had prevailed, and she managed to extract an explanation regarding the presence of both the Gilded Lotus and Lieutenant Star's body in the commander's quarters. Rainbow managed to remove the helmet of Hurricane's armor from Masquerade, but the assassin was clever enough to lay a further illusion of the commander's true face beneath that of the helmet. Having seemingly proven her innocence, Masquerade continued to pose as the commander, informing me that there was a traitor in the honor guard who had attempted to attack either Twilight, Rainbow, or one of the princesses. In order to prevent panic, he advised to take Celestia, Rainbow, and Twilight back to the guard headquarters, while he remained Luna until she finished raising the moon. Now at this point, it might be prudent of me to explain why I agreed to this proposal. First of all, Princess Celestia vouched for Captain Lightning's honesty, which, in my mind, was a powerful sign of fate. Secondly, though, was my assurance that Captain Lightning could handle the situation if something did go wrong. He had a very significant reputation within the guard, built up over only a seemingly long career, though he looked to be no more than 45. Regardless, even back when I was just a recruit, there were stories about the commander and his incredible skill in combat during the Dragon Wars. He was something of a legendary figure within the guard, so it didn't take very much for me to believe that he could successfully protect Princess Luna alone in the event of an attack. In any case, I began to accompany the Princess, Twilight, and Rainbow back to HQ. We weren't long on our way when Rainbow turned back. Following then the concerns of what Rainbow Dash later informed us about what had happened. Apparently, the commander at some point in his career suffered a severe wound to one of his legs, which left him with a serious limp. During our party, Masquerade had failed to maintain her performance of this trait, giving away her identity as an imposter. As such, Rainbow went back, and the two engaged in a short battle. Though Rainbow was ultimately correct, her lack of military training left her unable to combat Masquerade successfully. The assassin was able to poison Princess Luna while she was still in midair, using some magical artifact which she later identified as the Alcorn's Horn, a part of a set of potent but cursed charms. A description of the item can be found in the appendix. Princess Luna dipped into what would prove to be a fatal fall, and Rainbow's only means of saving her was to perform a sonic rainboom, her term, was produced an upward lateral shockwave which canceled out much of Princess Luna's momentum. Princess Celestia's eyes dropped to report, past an enormous segment which shining armor had apparently redacted, following Twilight's edits. Beneath it, his report continued in a slightly different tone. Its cause was a near supersonic collision with the ground. Rainbow Dash was seriously injured, to the degree that non-medical ponies who witnessed the event erroneously believed her to have died on impact. Princess Luna was hospitalized, comatose, and growing worse, despite the fact that the alicorn's horn which had stabbed her was no longer in her body. I lack any formal medical training, and as such, my summaries on this topic will be brief. Preliminary tests were inconclusive, and the medical staff faced a great deal of difficulty in raising a diagnosis as they were unsure of how many of the princess's symptoms were a result of poison, and how many were the result of her own unique magical powers and immortality. Princess Celestia was able to assist in Rainbow Dash's recovery, and the next morning, August 2nd, at approximately 8 a.m., she summarized the above events for us. Princess Celestia, myself, and then Second Lieutenant Soldier On, Honor Guard, who was the highest ranking of the surviving Honor Guard. After a brief discussion, we, as the Guard, settled on a course of action of hunting down Masquerade as quickly as possible, on the assumption she would likely know a cure. Or at least a name for the poison or malady that she affected the princess. I immediately made an appointment with Magus Cloudy Mirror, the instructor of illusion magic at the Royal Academy. He gave instructive lessons on Masquerade's likely magical influence, see her profile below, as he taught me a counterspell for her most direct attacks. Professor Mirror is a genius when it comes to illusions, but his academic rigor in explaining the subject leaves a bit to be desired. He could be a valuable resource for teaching the Royal Guard about illusions in the future, though. During this time, Rainbow Dash volunteered herself for service in the Honor Guard, and was briefly given the rank of private. She was proven reluctant to discuss her own events during this period, and the tragic death of her partner, Corporal Deadeye Reckoning. Leave my account of her actions third hoof as best. However, her part in Princess Luna saving Princess' life cannot be overstated, so I shall do my best to summarize her involvement with my knowledge. Rainbow spent most of the day, again, August 2nd, receiving rather brutal hoof-to-hoof combat training with Sergeant Thundercrack, Honor Guard. It is neither my place to comment on his methods, nor do they fall within the purview of this report. Wait, what's that supposed to mean? Oh, I'm supposed to be writing this. The following day, August 3rd, Luna's chief doctor, Asclepius, MD, PhD, HPP, ECC, etc., produced a strange diagnosis. The princess was aging to death. Having no better alternative, he gave her his best guess of 5 days to live, much as he might an elderly pony in the hospice. At this point, the burden of a cure fell almost slowly on the Guard, but I was unable to move out in pursuing cure. I had obligations at the Council of Nobles. It was so simply left to dispatch those Guard ponies I could contact, and hope that one of them might track down a suitable lead. One such pony was First Lieutenant Mark Down, Royal Guard, who identified a lead successing a traitor in the Honor Guard, beyond Masquerade's replacement of Captain Liney and Lieutenant Starr. He further suggested that the traitor was Stalingradi. In hindsight, the suspicions obviously point toward Lieutenant On, but at the time, my focus was directed toward the new Honor Guard captain appointed that night, Captain Pulisic Kalivno. I assumed this to be Stalingrad for red ink, as that was the English name he uses. Formerly the commandant of the Stalingradi Black Guard, known as the Black Coats, Captain Ink has a well-deserved reputation for inspiring fear by cruelty. Unlike Sergeant Crack, this is a matter that involves this report, and I will expound upon it further as its significance rises. That translation is pretty generous. On the other hand, I wouldn't go by if it were my name either. I certainly wouldn't use it as a name for a foal. Shortly prior to the normal meeting of the Council of Nobles, but immediately after my introduction to the then Commander Inc., I was informed of an incident taking place within my office at the Royal Guard headquarters by Lieutenant On. I traveled to the site and found Lieutenant Down dead, hurled out my window into the training courtyard on the overlooks. After consulting the recruits who I had left stationed there after my previously mentioned dispatches, I head up to the office, where I found a seriously injured Sergeant Crack and the latter half of a letter from Lieutenant Down, which provided the information I listed above. That night, Captain Ink was appointed, due to his previous encounters with Masquerade by my understanding, though the Royal Guard archives have no record of her activity in or around Stalingrad. Then again, given that we have record of only 2 other cases involving the assassin, I am prepared to accept his word on the matter. We further reached the conclusion that Soldier On was the traitor who had killed Mark Down, and added her to our list of potential leads on the cure for Princess Luna. Next morning, August 4th, at dawn, 7 a.m., I followed the lead to a somewhat well-known miscellaneous criminal and enforcer named Grizzaloo, archive ID number 000003592, who in turn directed me to Cloudsdale, where I could find a smuggler and drug distributor known as Go-Between. Before I was able to secure transit, however, I was confronted by several of Captain Ink's black cloaks, who had been outright assaulting civilians in order to obtain the same information I already possessed. I ended up with an altercation in one, whom I incapacitated. The black cloaks, named for the heavy winter coats they wear, have a reputation in Stalingrad for incidents like this. Despite, or because of the fear they inspire, though, they are generally treated as heroes within the domain of Stalingrad, and the city itself in particular. Also, Grizzaloo, I thought Project was bad. Similarly, that night, Private Marathon, Honor Guard, finished escorting Rainbow Dash to meet with Corporal Reckoning in Zabrika. From there, I literally have no knowledge of her actions until the 7th, so I shall simply note that she and Corporal Reckoning acted in pursuit of a cure for Princess Luna. Later that same day, I reached Cloudsdale, and, after a confrontation, I was able to apprehend Go-Between. I confirmed that Masquerade had been in contact with him, but when I attempted to interrogate him, he was killed by an enchantment she had placed in his subconscious mind. At this point, the trail was dead, and I thought Masquerade had simply gotten away, until I had a rather fortunate encounter with Counselor Silverlining, the famous cloud architect. After some small talk, he informed me, rather accidentally, that Masquerade had provided credit for the warehouse which Go-Between had purchased from the Counselor. Masquerade's bank statement led to Baltimore, so I acquired the assistance of 2 of the Wonderbolts and traveled there. That night, at a time I have since forgotten, I met Lieutenant Flagg, who I am known by reputation, but whose acquaintance I had never made. We ate dinner together, during which time I was apparently poisoned by either Masquerade herself or some pony working on her behalf. At the time, I was unaware of the event, but I now believe I was targeted by Fade Seas, as Rainbow would later describe them. Regardless, at the time of our conversation seemed peaceful. Lieutenant Flagg knew Masquerade had some sort of base of operations in Baltimore, but further informed me that Soldier On would be arriving in that area shortly. She had a trap set, but required my help, which I agreed to cautiously. In the intervening time, I required a request for a Masquerade from the bank, and set about investigating it. To my surprise, however, Soldier On was there, apparently for the same purpose I was. We engaged in combat. Due to the poisoning effect of Fade Seeds, an incredibly confined space which led to the advantage to On's Endura, I was severely unmatched. She had the full opportunity to kill me, but instead spared my life. She then traveled away, apparently to save Lieutenant Flagg from Masquerade's influence. Celestia's brow inclined as Twilight's horn riding grew slightly shaky, obviously concerned by the harm Shiny was describing to her. It was a strange sight to see her emotions reflected in the writing of a spell, but with the young and potent bearer of magic, the princess had long since learned to accept what would otherwise seem impossible. Very late that night, or perhaps early the next morning, August 5th, I encountered Red Ink, who was more interested in following On's trail than Masquerade's, due to some obvious past conflict between the two, and had made his way to Baltimore for that purpose. Flagg, On, he, and I met in a large market area rather by accident, at which point the 3 of us attempted to capture On. I note that the potency of her magic cannot be underestimated. While I was forced to rely on mana from Platina's ward due to the Fade Seeds I had been poisoned with, I was nevertheless fighting as best as I could. Flagg did the same, as did Ink. She certainly struggled against us, but that fact was even able to flee when outnumbered by so severely marks her as a considerable danger. In any case, partway through the battle, Red Ink released his full empha. He clearly specializes in fire mana, which is naturally attuned to the user's anger and rage. Thus, when a civilian interrupted our conflict, he responded by not only attacking her, but setting fire to a large apartment building. Whether this was out of uncontrollable anger or an actual lack of care for the lives of civilians, I do not know. But regardless, such actions is unforgivable of a guard's pony. Further, his actions forced me to allow Soldier On to escape. I instead focused my attention on assisting the evacuation of the building. Wait, he just... Apologies. Captain Armor had to remind me that it wasn't my place to make comments on this particular issue. During this event, I was stunned to find that Soldier On had doubled back on both Lieutenant Flag and Captain Ink, and returned to help as well. Seeing not only she was helping civilians, but that I was rather incapable of confronting her on my own without Mana to speak of, I allowed her to assist, then leave without further confrontation. I note that she headed in a westward direction, but given Baltimore's location, that information was likely worthless in an hour. Prior to her departure, she did tell me that her treason was not something she had done, but something she had chosen not to do. Whether or not we are prepared to believe this statement remains to be seen, but it suggests to me that she was aware of the poison Masquerade had used, if not the plot itself, and chose to say something. Her motivations for this action have eluded me. I returned to Canterlot, where I spent the remainder of August 5th managing an enormous piles of report from across Equestria, dictating that my squads had failed to find a cure. Nothing of note happened to me that particular day, though I am aware that in some capacity, Rainbow Dash passed the time in the Griffin capital of Griffiths, a portion of which spent in the company of their emperor, Magnus. That night, she discovered the Fade Seeds, or realized their significance, and flew back to Canterlot, arriving just after midnight on August 6th. From this time, I assumed the intense urgency of locating Masquerade had largely been lost. While still obviously a threat, her capture was no longer a matter of life and death for Princess Luna. As a result, I began sending out dispatches to return the Royal Guard to regular postings and duties. This activity was cut off by a rather surprising letter delivered to me by a civilian merman, but addressed by the Royal Seal to Princess Celestia. I delivered the letter, and she revealed that it had been apparently sent by Captain Lightning. At this time, I assumed that meant he was alive, though that was not the first thought on my mind. Princess Celestia has since informed me that while the contents of the letter were personal, they affirmed her suspicions as to the late captain's fate. As tragic as this realization had been, I can at least be thankful that we aren't looking at the security risk of his considerable military knowledge, let alone whatever secrets the honor guard had been hiding, falling into the unknown hostile hooves. All this information, however, was less pressing than the small connection I had made the very moment of Princess' statement, however. At this point, I must confess I acted rather hastily. I knew that the letter had been delivered from Ponyville, and also that Masquerade was the only pony in a position to either forge a letter for Captain Lightning or deliver one posthumously. As a result, my assumption was that Masquerade was in Ponyville, most likely attempting to assassinate one of the bearers of the Elements of Harmony. In fear for my sister, as well as interest in my duty, I immediately enlisted Rainbow Dash's help in traveling to Ponyville. We arrived at approximately 1:30 p.m. and began to search for the target. Our arrival gathered quite a bit of local attention, and I was forced to address the crowd, ordering them away from the site. To my immense surprise, and for reasons I still do not understand, Masquerade assumed the guise of Captain Lightning and assisted me in the matter. Only when we were alone did she reveal herself, bluntly stating her intention to kill me. Her words suggested that some pony, or perhaps someone is the correct term, had taken out a contract on my life as well. I'll spare you a blow-by-blow account, instead summarizing that Masquerade ultimately had me outmatched. While she had clearly fought a military-trained unicorn before, I had no experience in fighting against an illusionist, let alone one of her skill. I quickly received a severe wound on the neck, and desperation, engaged in Iron Curtain Scammage. For those unfamiliar with the attack, it consists of teleporting both oneself and one's opponent high into the air, and then ready with a counterspell for when they attempt to levitate or teleport. Normally, there is a risk that both parties will die, but I knew I had enough mana invested in Platinum's ward to survive the landing without slowing down myself. I instead devoted my full attention to assuring Masquerade could not do the same. I failed to notice the phantasms he had placed on me, and as a result, believed that she had died on impact, when in fact she was able to descend calmly by levitation. Iron Curtain was the captain of the Royal Guard almost 750 years ago during the Woodland War against the Elk. He used this gambit to defeat one of the major commanders and turned the tide at the Battle of Loyalliar Falls. Since then, it's been taught as part of both military history and training for the more violent type of magic duels. Following this type of altercation, Rainbow Dash saved my life by attacking Masquerade directly, and was in turn saved by the timely intervention of Princess Celestia herself. While I would have likely objected at this time to her involvement with such a dangerous opponent, especially with Luna's fate still unknown, I can now say with the benefit of hindsight, her power was likely necessary to best the deadly combination of Masquerade's illusions and the power of the Alicorn's horn. She was petrified, and the resulting object is now in the custody of the Royal Guard. Threat analysis of the subjects. Masquerade, Paul. Unicorn, female, age 25. Dark blue indigo coat. Black mane with highlights in dark blue and dark purple. An average 3 feet 2 inches at the shoulder. Cutie mark depicts a frowning mask, as often seen in theatrical productions. I have been able to find no formal record of her birth or education. Captain Red Ink alleges he had learned Arcana by studying with a dragon named Philosik, draconic for Enigma by my understanding. That translation is correct. Enigma was a famous worm scholar who made some significant progress in the research of divination and predestination magic. Given the way he wrote, I'm surprised he teaches magic to some pony like Masquerade, though I guess it's possible he didn't know what she was going to do with it. While no longer nearly the threat she had once been, Masquerade may still pose a significant escape risk when, if, released from her imprisonment. An action I fully recommend in order to interrogate her regarding the other members of this conspiracy. A lodestone ring fitting would provide adequate initial security measure, but her considerable magic talents suggest her likelihood of saturating the stone and attempting escape would be a matter of if, but when. I sent orders to the remnants of King Sombra's void crystals, almost 4 times as magically absorptive in nature as lodestone, for the Crystal Empire to be shipped to Camelot for our use in improving our dungeons and prisons in general, as well as her specific containment. In terms of combat ability, Masquerade's favorite tactics seem to be misdirection or illusion to leave the target vulnerable, followed by a fatal strike. Her incredible talent with nightmare illusions, as outlined by Professor Cloudy Mirror, which were otherwise mostly unknown within Equestria due to royal ban, was fully irresistible to the average guards pony. As for a method of dealing actual damage, she seemed to be favoring some sort of heat and age-based disintegration spell. She also used a great deal of indirect telekinetic attacks based on rubble, blades, and whatever else she could find present. I attest, however, this may have been due to her familiarity with Platinum's ward, and her realization that a direct attack might have only made me stronger. I also note that she only attempted her actual magic attack against me after she had managed to remove my helmet. Though I wasn't present to see the spell, the description seems rather similar of ancient accounts of Dismal's infernal decay. The knowledge of that spell has been lost more than 1,000 years. Then again, a similar story could be told for the nightmare illusions. Her style overall resembles classical battalion arcane dueling, with emphasis focus and speed over power. Ultimately, too many questions remain unanswered on this subject. An addendum, if not a full second report, will be written once I or other guards ponies have had the opportunity to interrogate the subject. Soldier on. Earth pony. Female. Age 30. Off-white coat. Eggshell mane. Cutie mark depicts a pair of interlinked horseshoes. Stands at normally 4 feet 1 inches at the shoulder. Currently missing approximately half of her right ear. My doing, from our first encounter in Baltimore. Though it may have healed, see below. Born into the domain of Stalingrad under the name of Tverzoyska, meaning resistant or durable, though formal records were lost during the Blizzard Revolution. Records of her life are conflicting and spotting until the Revolution, during which time she fought her on behalf of Stalingrad's reigning baron, Frostbite. After his defeat and execution, she led a continuing resistance against the Tsar Wasvali. Her motives for this resistance are unknown, as are the reasons he ultimately left to join the Royal Guard. Captain Liney only notes it was hard to convince her to leave her homeland, but she knew that her corpse wouldn't do any more good there. Tragically, his notes end there. Wait, 4 foot 1 inches? That's as Big Magatos! How does she hide? You'd be able to see her over most wagons, let alone in a crowd! Thankfully, information on her military skills are more complete, even within Captain Lining's incomplete set of records. On demonstrates incredible endura, which is devoted almost entirely to her physical strength. She also displays a mild danger sense and magically accelerated rate of healing and recovery. while it still takes her an extended period to recover from most serious wounds, she demonstrates virtually no fatigue, able to stay awake and alert for as much as a full week without rest, providing sufficient food and water. This incredible magic may have been cultivated by phage seeds beyond its natural levels, though at the moment this is no more than speculation. Regardless, Captain Lying notes that she displays no capability whatsoever in the cultivation of produce, being no more effective at farming than the average Pegasus or unicorn. In hoof-to-hoof combat, she is familiar with Stalingradi Sambo, though my personal encounter suggests that she both favors and is more proficient in the Trottingham hoof boxing style taught to Royal Guard recruits, albeit with a much greater focus on the full draw bucking and full body blows than concern for her own defense. Despite her size, she is very fast, and also surprisingly flexible. Outside of direct combat, Soldier On exhibits a particular skill in evasion and stealth, particularly in urban environs, most likely a skill learned after the revolution in Stalingrad. In point of fact, she told me herself she had a habit of kicking a hole in the wall, and then simply not going through it, in order to misdirect pursuers. In terms of her motives for treason, I have very little information. The first piece is that she is not directly hostile to other guards ponies, even those trying to apprehend her. She only fought me after I attacked. This statement is untrue of Captain Inc. due to their past conflicts, but nevertheless suggests that, free in Greater Equestria, she does not pose a threat to civilian population. Lieutenant Town suggested that the Blizzard Revolution may have had an effect on her reaction to Princess Luna, although given that revolution itself predates Luna's return, I fail to see a connection. The second part of her motive I've been able to gather comes from Captain Lining's profile of her. He says, in a description of his choice for Luna's bodyguard, that, while she is invalid as a choice for the same ultimate reason as most of us, the choice of his hatred is unique. I suspect that, given Captain Lining's death, his meaning will only be discovered if we are to ask Soldier On herself. Continued risk assessment. In the intermediate period, the potential risk to Equestria seems very low. As described above, Soldier On is unlikely to propose a threat to Equestria as a whole, and her favored methods would make it very likely for her to return and strike at Princess Luna directly, without being directed by the guards I have stationed at the palace. However, in the long run, this incident has revealed and affirmed a number of gaping security threats in both Canterlot and Equestria. The first and foremost concerns are Masquerade's so-called nightmare illusions. While the royal ban on these spells is completely understandable, the fact that they have not been taught or studied leaves the guards with a virtual inability to defend itself or Equestria against such attacks. Her methods have obvious parallels with the Changeling invasion 3 years past, however, and I hope that we will be able to adapt the Academy's Changeling detection spells to help deal with several illusions. On the other hoof, the fact that Masquerade was able to directly trigger one of these spells suggests that perhaps she and others could be aware of them enough to bypass their defenses. In point of fact, I'm nowhere near a skilled enough formal maze to deal with the issue, but it does need to be addressed in some manner. You don't give yourself enough credit, Captain Armor. Even if you didn't go to the Academy, you know an awful lot about magic than the average unicorn. I also observed that Captain Lining's methods apparently left some large scraps in the Honor Guard's integrity. While I do observe that his contributions in the past were integral to Equestria's security, notably, it was he who alerted me to the unknown threat that would prove to be the Changelings 3 years ago. His loss left the Honor Guard to essentially crumble in upon itself. In the future, it seems that apparent some sort of redundancy, or at least sharing of knowledge, be maintained between the Honor Guard and Royal Guard. Perhaps most tangible, and at some point most elusive, threat is that Masquerade was most likely hired to kill Princess Luna. While we cannot guarantee that she was not acting alone, several clues point to her having some sort of sponsor, notably her possession of the Alcorn's horn. Unfortunately, like the rest of its scent, the horn's location was unknown prior to Masquerade's attack. Therefore, we lack the ability to trace it back to a conspirator. Thus, for the moment, the assassin herself seems our most likely means of identifying the contractor behind this conspiracy. Actually, I know where the Alcorn's amulet is. A rival of mine tells me to a duel of using it. Ha! You admit it! Trixie is your rival! Ha ha! That is victory for Trixie. I'll see if I can get in touch with her and find out where she got it from, though I'm not sure how far the trail will go. Appendix. Artifacts. Alcorn's Horn. part of a set of ancient mana-focusing charms. Princess Celestia suggests that they are older than pony civilization, and that they were made for Princess Luna as a means which she could fight discord, prior to the discovery of the elements. There are 5 pieces: the horn, the crest, essentially blunted wing blades, the tiara, amulet, and hooves. 2, the tiara and amulet, serve as both mana reservoirs and focusing matrices for all 3 types of magic. In lay ponies' terms, any pony could put either of these items on and find their respective magic increased both in quantity and potency.
Wait, if there are 4 hooves, wouldn't that make that 9 pieces? I guess it makes sense to consider them as just 1 for convenience, but it could be misleading. Why not? Do they not focus without 4? That would fit the pattern of the other multi-pixel magical devices like
the other 3 items, the horn, the crest, which are in fact paired by a silver chain, and the hooves, metal boots, serve to enhance a specific type of mana. Arcana for the horn, Empha for the crest, and the Durna for the hooves. Thus are only usable for respective types of ponies, or by an alicorn. All the items are cursed in their unique way. I did not pretend to know the sources of these enchantments. The princess only explained that they were not present when the items were created. When the item in question is depetrified, I intend to have it turned over to the Royal Academy for research. But for now, the curse is yet another unknown in this enormous puzzle.
the Alicorn's amulet, or the Alicorn amulet. I've seen it referenced in both texts. Corrupts its wearer, driving them to use its power more and more, often in cruel or arbitrary ways. I checked the text which describes the amulet's curse, but unfortunately, its description of the other items was even less helpful than what we had already recorded here. Hurricane's armor and Platinum sword. Though these are 2 very different items, I list them here together for their surprising similarities. Hurricane's armor and Platinum sword are magical suits of armor designed originally for the ponies and those honored they are named, Commander Hurricane and President Platinum III. Both are physically resilient suits of armor designed to endure both direct physical attacks and to absorb mana directly harmful toward the wearer. Hurricane's armor achieves this by what I was surprised to learn was a coating to smoothed void crystals, the same dark crystals later used by Sombra to enslave the Crystal Empire. Platinum sword is adamantine shell covered in plates of pure amethyst, the gem with the best overall capacity for the absorption of arcana. Both store the mana which they absorb, but to very different purposes. Commander Hurricane's armor was given to him by Starswirl the Bearded in exchange for his historical defense of the Unicorn Kingdom at the time. This predates the Heartwarming Eve story by some 12 years. I had previously believed that the armor created an illusion on the wearer, but Princess Celestia explained that this was not the case. As the armor was designed for a Pegasus wearer, it functions on Empha rather than Arcana, by physically transforming the wearer into one of the 4 classical elements at the directive, or to survive a dangerous attack. Each form, fire, water, earth, and air, had its own strengths and drawbacks, but for now, I shall spare the full details. Captain Lightning, the last owner of the armor, favored the earth form, using it to disguise himself as a statue, and slow his metabolism in order to remain on guard over the princess for days at a time. Since its creation, the armor has undergone a small number of changes. Most notably, it now has the ability to disguise its wearer as a generic guards pony, much like some of the older traditional Royal Guard armor. The whereabouts of Hurricane's armor are currently unknown, and will also need to be acquired from Masquerade. It is likely, however, that whoever hired her is now in possession of this potent artifact. So the commander actually turned into stone? I suppose this explains how he could still sit still for so long. When I was learning how to control my telekinesis, Princess Celestia taught me how to fold paper airplanes. After I had about 100, she picked a few up with her magic and started throwing them at the commander. He just ignored them, but when I threw one, he swooped down and grabbed it out of the air like lightning. I used to think it was so much fun. Platinum Ward was Commander Hurricane's gifts to Princess Platinum III, who succeeded him indirectly as the 3rd commander of the Equestrian Guard, which would go on to become the Royal Guard. Since then, it has been passed down among the highest ranking and most powerful unicorn in the Royal Guard, and it is now my honor that it remains in my possession. Platinum's ward serves as an enormous reservoir for arcana, and also creates a simple barrier against oncoming physical attacks, so long as it contains enough mana to do so. I recently learned that it can serve attacks of Empha, as well as Arcana. Such threats are thankfully rare enough that I had no need prior of this information. Princess Platinum III, better known as the Warrior Princess to make her distinct from her predecessors, was rumored to be the offspring of Hurricane and one of the unicorn nobles in early Equestria. While research suggests that the accounts of his virility and copious activity are likely overstated, he certainly did so upon this for Platinum III, training her to be a warrior and allowing her to lead the Equestrian Guard in his old age. While it was well known that Hurricane commissioned the armor for her, the actual creator is well unknown. By the time of her birth, Hurricane was nearly 60, and Star Swirl was long dead. Probably the best theory of modern archaeologists suggests that it was designed by Clover the Clever, but by then they actually assembled by one of her apprentices due to her untimely death during the eruption of Cronets in AOE 29. Looking back, I kinda got off topic a lot. Are you sure you don't want to redo this, Shiny? No, I need this done now. Also, your spell is still on. What do you mean, Mike? End of incident report. Epilogue Part 2. The Funeral. We gathered here today in remembrance of our four lives given freely for the protection of countless more. The words sounded hollow and overwrought, as if the speaker was less concerned with the words' sincerity than the emotion they provoked. We owe it to them not to stand in mourning, for they are in a better place now. Her eyes glanced over the gathered, clad in black. All was silence and memory, but tears were few. We share in the sorrow, not that they have moved on, but that we are left behind. So instead, we remain behind in the knowledge that we shall some day be reunited with them. Celestia, resplendent in her full glory, glanced to the small stage that had been set up in the palace gardens. There, 3 ponies were waiting. A subtle nod brought the first forth. Shiny's armor face was beleaguered with emotion. He wore his radiant cuirass, but its usual glow appeared muffled even beneath the towering shine of the sun. His helmet was absent, exposing the bare glow of his horn. At his side, he levitated a beautifully engraved urn. Swirls of gold mixed with the stone to create a lively design, the vivacity which almost seemed out of place in the garden's somber atmosphere. The captain set down the urns at the end of the stage and looked up slowly. My name is Captain Shining Armor. I stand by my vigil in remembrance of Lieutenant Mark Down. He had heard them a dozen times before, the traditional opening words of a guard's pony's last rites. Yet, for the first time, the words bore weight. Thinking back, it seems almost a lifetime ago that Mark and I met in training. I doubt I would have made it into the guard without his help. He knew far more about magic than I did. Shining smiled arrogantly. After graduation, we served together whenever we had the chance. We fought soldier to wing in the Sabrika campaign, and did so again in Bitterly later that same year. We busted crime rings, dragged out spies all across Equestria. But I would be doing him an injustice if I let his memory amount to just battle. The guard's ponies glanced to a family of Pegasi sitting on his far left, and gave them a short but meaningful nod. Mark Down loved Equestria. He loved meeting ponies and seeing places. He loved life. He told me once that protecting, that was the reason he joined the guard, so that every pony else would enjoy it the same way he did. And whenever he wasn't on duty protecting what he loved, he would lead me out into the world and show me it. We visited nearly every city in Equestria. We met beautiful mares, ate expensive foods. In time, we had gone so far together that we reached the top. I had no intention of taking the post I now hold without him by my side, as my right hoof. The thought of him not being there in days to come still shakes me to my core. In the crowd, Cadence bore a small smile, though Shiny could see the sorrow buried under her face. She was being strong not for his sake, but for the young mare she held under her wing. Mark's younger sister, Rundown, was sobbing gently as he listened to the captain's words. The words he had earlier composed, with no small assistance from his wife, were a struggle to pull forth. He furrowed his brow and summoned the last of his resolve, determined to give his friend a worldly send-off. I could tell you stories until we were all gray-maned and wrinkled, but I think it's most important to remember this about Mark. He died the way he lived, protecting what he loved, and I don't think he would have given that up for the world. He allowed the final thought to hang in the air for the moment before glancing around in the crowd. Do any others hold Mark in their memories? His eyes turned fast to the other four royal guards in attendance. They shook their heads slowly, having no words to add to their captains. And so, calmly, he turned toward Mark's family. His sister Run was still too overwhelmed with emotion to speak, and his parents simply shook their heads. For a civilian ceremony, it might have been odd, but Shiny could understand. They were nearly the only civilians present, and the mass of gathering guards ponies was certainly intimidating when one wanted to share personal memories. Recognizing the silence, Shining's magic claimed the urn at the front of the stage. A flip of his head tossed it in the air. It soared with an intense momentum, seeming as though it would never stop. Before it reached its peak, however, the unicorn captain fired off another spell. A rose bolt collided with the marble urn, sending the glowing ashes across the sky in a display like fireworks. Celestia whispered gently from her seat at the foot of the stage. As his soul goes on to better places, we return his body to the sky, that it might soar amongst his kin forever. Shining spared her a glance, and made his way off stage to rejoin the gathered mourners. Without word or signal, the next pony followed. In Luna's eyes, Marathon's form was exposed and bare. The younger Pegasus had never seen the young diplomat without a flowing dress or at least a skirt. That day, though, she was garbed in a golden cuirass alone. Her missing legs were plain to see below the winged scroll that was her cutie mark. She placed the urn at the forefront of the stage and sat bluntly down behind it. My name is Private Marathon. I stand my vigil in remembrance of Morningstar. The diplomat spoke in soft tones, loud enough to be heard, but quiet enough to be overwhelmed by the strength of memories. I remember him as the perfect God's pony. She twisted the corners of her lips into the slightest hint of a smile, pretending that the happiness of the memory could counterbalance the strain of the event. From the day I joined the Guard, he was one I always looked up to. Like any good parts pony, he could be hard and serious, but life around him made our jobs a lot easier. She glanced around the three other honor guard, who had remained both loyal and alive over the past weeks. We remember him playing cards with us, drinking, laughing, and sharing our time off together. And when he was on duty, he had our respect. Marathon took a deep breath, and turned to the royal guards and civilians present. Her gaze swept over every present pony, save Luna herself. It wasn't a surprise. In his own way, he was the soul of the honor guard. He kept us alive, and tied us back to remind us why we do what we do. When I joined 7 years ago, he told me that the honor guard was like a family, and in that family, Star was our big brother. He looked out for us, learning about not if we were just going into danger, but also how we were feeling. He cared about us, about keeping us safe. There's a saying, back from Commander Hurricane's time, Quis cusus y possus custodes? Who guards the guard? And the answer I will always remember is, he did. The guard's pony spread her wings, glancing once more to her peers on the highest branch of Equestria's guard. I say these words not only for myself, but by the agreement of my companions. Before we send our brother on his way, are there any who wish to remember him alongside us? Marathon clearly expected no pony to step forward. She already had the agreement of the other guard, and all of Morningstar's immediate family had preceded him in death. Therefore, when she moved toward his urn, she was caught off guard by the tap of hooves approaching the stage. The honor guard shared uncomfortable looks. Thundercrack, as blunt as ever, furrowed his brow and wrinkled his muzzle in a cruel scowl. White Flag and the unicorn stallions he sat beside were more subtle, but their distaste for her involvement was no less present. Only Marathon maintained an even face. Even now, she did not show gratitude for the princess's motion. Luna saw them. That was clear. She hesitated when her eyes met theirs, and none of their hooves took far too long in its progress toward a reasonable step. But the princess would not be silent. She carried herself without assurance, but she carried herself nevertheless to Marathon's side. There, she looked out at the crowd, avoiding the gazes of her harshest critics. Her words came slowly, forcing themselves out without the burden of her more comfortable archaic tongue. I remember Morning Star. Thundercrack actually had the gall to try and rise. The unicorn stallion sitting between him and the white flag right the foreleg over his shoulder, and fairly nearly tackled him back into a sitting position. No words were said, and very little noise was made. Some of the other mourners did not notice, but Luna did. Her eyes ran away quickly, as if to acknowledge a justified shame. I never truly learned his name. He had been assigned to me, and I considered him a burden rather than a friend. But he endured. He endured us at my worst. He was with me for 5 years, and he never once complained. When danger came, he gave his life. The younger princess, suddenly aware that she had no final thought for her words, glanced awkwardly from the crowd and glanced away. Rainbow Dash, who sat at the far side of the stage holding the last of the urns, felt her heart crumble in sympathy. It overrode her distaste for the entire ceremony, and the butterflies that were dominating her stomach. Twilight had helped her prepare for her own speech, but it was spilling out of her mind at a speed to rival her own flight. She struggled to focus on it so hard that she completely missed the shattering of Star's urn, as the result of a single blast from an honor guard's unicorn mare. Marathon flashed slowly off the stage, offering Rainbow a short pat on the shoulder as he passed. Rainbow gulped, nodded, and strode onto the stage. An urn filled with plain sand was her companion. It was the best substitute that could be found for the ashes of a body resting at the bottom of Griffiths. His armor fit almost comfortably, despite having been sized for a stallion. She resisted at first. She still insisted she was done with the guard. They told her that only a guard's pony could stand vigil for another, and so she agreed quietly to don the golden plate once more. He told her it was his. He had left it in Canterlot the last time he had worn it, 5 years earlier in Ponyville. The birds of lightning had deformed the golden plates that formed its chest slightly, but nevertheless clearly. Even without thinking, she knew they would fit perfectly over the spiderweb of burns she had seen beneath his shirt. She discarded the thought only as a measure of respect for Luna. My name is The syllable dragged itself out, but she could not bring herself to use the title. She shook her head, dislodging the last of her practiced speech, and started again in her own words. They would not be eloquent or beautiful, but they would be honest and heartfelt. My name is Rainbow Dash, and I stand vigil for Corporal Dead Reckoning. No pony commented that she had broken from tradition. She had earned enough respect for that. She sucked down a breath of warm August air and began to speak. I didn't know Deadeye long. We only met 2 weeks ago. But I knew him. He was my partner. She glanced to where her 5 friends had gathered, in support of her rather than sorrow of their own. He was my friend. She pictured the quirky smile that wrapped across his own jaw, deformed on the far left by ancient scars of Griffin's talons. Reckoning was an adventurer. It was his special talent, and what he always wanted out of life. That's what drew him to the guard, and why he wouldn't quit, no matter what. The words were close to what she had prepared, but they were also her own. He lost his eye, and he got old, even started to lose his mind. But even with all that, I don't think I have ever known some pony to be so alive. For just a moment, she thought she could see him standing there in the jungle. He slapped the back of his own head, and his eye popped out. She gasped, and he had laughed, harder and heartier than ponies a third of his age. I guess what I'm trying to say is that to me, Deadeye wasn't really a guard's pony, or how he stood stiff. What I remember most about him was that he cared. I barely knew him for a week, but in that time, he was open to me like we had known each other forever. And I guess that's why it hurts so much that he's gone. Rainbow looked over at the crowd. Her friends wore somber expressions, but they hadn't known him. It was the honor guard who shared the greatest sympathy for Rainbow's words. They nodded slowly, admiring her reflection on their lost friend. She spoke up. I guess that's what I wanted to say. Does anyone else, Is there anyone else who wants to remember Dead Reckoning? The honor guards shared a glance amongst themselves, but none moved a step forward. The rest didn't move. Rainbow quickly spared a look toward Reckoning's brother, though she expected nothing. He had wanted nothing to do with his brother in life, and the appearance of both he and his family was the result of obligation and nothing more. After the moment for response had passed, the mayor cut Reckoning's urn in one foreleg and shot up into the air. The mourners watched in silence as the rainbow blurb shot into the sunny sky. No sooner had she been shot into the sky than she ducked down again. Her rapidly beating wings sent her toward the ground far faster than the marble urn. A mere feet from the ground, Rainbow turned and drew back her hind legs in tandem. On that clear sunny day, all across Equestria, ponies saw a bolt of lightning fly upward into a cloudless sky from the peak of Mountain of Dawn. The sand that served as a replacement for honest ashes scattered on the winds to the far corners of the world. Without a word, Rainbow returned to the ground. She could no longer conjure no more fitting memorial for her friend. She skipped the stage altogether, landing at the edge of a stage and walking quietly out into the crowd. For the first time in her life, she was glad when no pony applauded. It would have seemed unfair. Far away from the young mare landed, a cloaked and hooded mare sat behind a statue of Commander Hurricane, rearing up in her stone armor. She had stood strong again through the whole ceremony, and as still as the statue concealed her from view. When Celestia moved back to the stage, carrying the fourth and final urn, though, the mare suddenly collapsed as beneath a great weight. Unaware of the observer, Princess Celestia's gilded hooves tapped gently across the stage, as he set down the urn softly. I am Celestia, and I stand my vigil in remembrance of the commander. The mare's voice was nothing more than a whisper, yet she spoke just the same. My name is Lieutenant Sojourn, and I stand my vigil in remembrance of the commander. The Marne sat down slowly, and looked directly at the broken remnant of her honor guard. What does the name really mean? Sojourn heard the eloquence in her words, but she also detected their artifice. I do not call my defender Steel Lightning now, any more than I would in his life. It was not truly his name, only a label he endured, as he endured so much more. Celestia glanced to the sky. Too much. There was emotion in the crowd, but it went ignored. Instead, Sojourn nodded, remembering the pains that the commander had endured. Cuts, scrapes, were dragon claws and changeling horns, and so much more had torn his flesh and split his blood. Yet the fact that made him great was that he had endured. The wounds always proved shallow in time. Only one scar had ever truly clung to him. The traitor's eyes jumped to the crowd as a red Pegasus in a heavy black cloak leaned forward in interest. A scowl spread across the mayor's face. Red Ink and his usurping father had no right to bear witness to the commander's memorial. Celestia paid no attention to Red Ink's minor motion. Her gentle words continued, unabated. The commander was a stallion who saw only the prize and paid no mind to the cost. He was a guards pony because his life was not of value. He kept few friends, only those who would help him in his task. Family would have been a burden, so he passed on it entirely. Sojourn caught a subtle motion from within the small cluster of young mares that composed the elements. The soldier had been a mother once. She knew what pain looked like even from afar. To approach and offer comfort was beyond her. So she wished peace only from afar, even as her ears continued to listen to her closest friend's eulogy. Few knew him by his face, and even fewer knew him by name. Yet each and every one of us owes no small part to the peace we enjoy to the stallion, who paid so much of it not with his death, but with his life. Celestia lowered her head to stare at the urn for only a few spare moments before continuing. Without family, his memory is shared only amongst the few of us who have gathered here today. I urge you to hold on to that memory as we move on from this place in this moment. As he glanced across the crowd of listeners he was aware of, gazing into each of their eyes. Do any of you wish to share in his memory? Far more than a moment's silence, Star's watchful eye rose. Solzeron's scowl grew deeper yet as he watched the small alicorn summit the steps to stand behind a mare twice his height. Celestia gave him a knowing, comforting glance, but he seemed to spurn the gesture.
In Stalingrad, we have a word for a pony who makes sacrifices to help many others. In English, that word is hero. I met the stallion known as the Commander more than 20 years ago, and the first thing I saw in him was a hero. In those days, the dragons had darkened the sky with scales on fire. His arrival was the first ray of hope my home enjoyed in months. I would have lost my wife and sons were it not for his presence.
How dare you speak of family? Solzeron's host pressed down on the statue of Hurricane so hard, the stone began to crack. Only the noise drew away her forceful hoof, fearing it would draw attention to her presence. The Tsar paced slowly, to set down on the fairy stage behind the urn.
I had wished in those days to call him my friend. He resisted, because in his mind, to be a friend was to give up time he could have spent helping others. He had no family, so I offered to share mine in him. He was a mentor to my sons, and a protector to my family. A friend to me.
The Tsar bowed his head.
I will remember him fondly and well.
After a moment of silence, clearly offering the stage to another speaker, the Tsar retreated. Only a moment later, 5 ponies took to the stage. The 4 remaining honor guard gathered around their new captain. It brought Solzeron a bit of pride to see the pain with which Red Ink moved, the result of the scar she had left across his chest. Though it was concealed by a thick black sash, it was present just the same. The satisfaction was not enough, though, to offset her anger that Ink was standing in her place. Red Ink took the commander's urn in his hooves, and then glanced briefly towards Celestia. She nodded, and a golden glow wrapped around her horn. The Pegasus shot into the air, trailing smoke as he carried his predecessor into the clouds. It took only longer for Ink to climb it than Rainbow, but the journey was short nonetheless. Nearly stolen from view by the glare of the sun, Red Ink's silhouette dropped the urn. Celestia's magic grew suddenly stronger, bearing the thread and focus together in a brilliant spear. Having found her last closer with the honor guard and Canterlot, Solzeron turned and left, feeling a chapter of her life drawing to a close with each and every step. After it was done, they had gathered around small tables, chatting and sparing each other brief and meaningless glances. One table sat 5 miserable ponies. The 6th of their member had gone to her brother, confident that Rainbow could be taken care of in the company of her 4 other friends. Each of the 4 struggled to find some words that it might magically solve their problems. The exercise was painful, heavy, and in Rainbow's eyes, completely unfair. She stared down at a plate of greens, then forced her head up to look at her friends. At least one noticed. "How you holding up, Sugar Cube?" "Fine," Rainbow lied. Rarity patted her friend on the shoulder.
"Your friend, Mr. Reckoning, sounds like a delightful fellow."
"Yeah." The simple word was as dead as he was. He was. Trying to cheer up her friend more bluntly, Pinkie Pie's voice joined her friend's.
"That lightning trick was pretty awesome."
"He taught me it." What followed was a painful, awful silence between them among the bears. All save Rainbow looked to one another, each wishing they knew what to say. None did. So instead, a paltry lunch was eaten, and a discomfort hung in the air like a fog. Finally, in silent outrage, and her oldest friend's suffering, Fluttershy had leaned forward across the table and directly looked at Rainbow.
Rainbow, I just wanted to ask, if it's okay, do you want to talk about your dad?"
A brown hat swiveled towards the speaker. Fluttershy, I don't think her pa has anything to do with this." Rarity followed the motion.
"I do have to ask what you mean."
"Yeah, Fluttershy,"
Pinkie Pie, determined not to be left out, spoke up.
"What gives?"
"Well, you see, it's just that when Rainbow and I were fillies growing up in Cloudsdale..."
Rainbow put a hoof down on the tabletop. She meant nothing by the accent, but the place on the table surface jumped into force. "My dad died in the Dragon Wars when I was a Fool, Rainbow answered, spite leaking into her words. Big deal. I got over it a long time ago. Now hold your horses, Rainbow. Why are y'all getting all worked up over this? I'm not! She answered with another slam of her hoof. Fluttershy's drink spilled, and the timid mare retreated from the edge of the table. Even in her awful state, the fright she had instilled earned her a slight condemnation from Applejack. Overborne with emotion, the mare clutched her mane and gritted her teeth. Fine, whatever. I'm going to sit alone for a bit. Before they could answer, she turned around and strode away. There wasn't much distance, but in the somber quiet, no pony was willing to call her. Abandoning them was liberating in her own way, though Rainbow knew in her heart that the feeling itself was twisted and wrong. She didn't care. She needed the space. She trotted away from the other tables, toward a statue labeled Victory. The marble bear standing with the fabric flag was quiet. That alone made her suitable company for Rainbow as she collapsed onto her flank and forced a trio of deep breaths into herself. She trotted away from... It wasn't long, however, before her hooves approached. They beat the ground with a deep brass tone, likely coming from Applejack's powerful legs. She didn't bother with even so much as a glance backward. Perhaps this was why she was surprised when a strangely masculine, heavily accented voice greeted her. You are here to be getting space, I expect. I could not stand to politic either. The pony who spoke was an all-red Pegasus, who seemed to have packed too much muscle into his naturally small frame. A heavy black cloak with a lining of rough gray fur around his neck covered most of his body, with only tiny slits for his wings. He hesitated before settling on a series of words. Red ink. Rainbow Dash, the mayor answered plainly. What's with the pause? I am imagining you do not want to hear about my rank. It is good. The princess is unhappy with me. That is why I'm here, apart from others. Inked on a devious but subtle smile, my brother is reminding me that it is bad form to start an altercation with shining armor at our mentor's funeral. Rainbow's curiosity was piqued, despite her buried anger at the stallion in question. What was he like? The commander. A real honest smile replaced the devious grin, though it faded quickly as the stallion remembered his loss. He was more than a mentor. I had many tutors in my life who taught me to be educated, to be diplomat. One even tried teaching Equestria. He laughed at his own broken language, and even Rainbow nearly smiled. But that emotion and the sound it accompanied were fleeting. Mentor was not like them. He taught me to be a stallion, to fight, to sacrifice. He was like father to me. Without a word, Rainbow stood and walked away. Shining Armor paced away from the Down family as they prepared to leave. His host carried him softly to his wife, who was sharing quiet, comforting words with the Tsar and his eldest son. She turned away from them when she noticed his approach.
Shining, how are you doing?
They're fine, Cadence. Run is No, Shining, how are you doing? The captain reacted to the question as if he had been physically struck. After a brief recoil, he set his eyes properly on the mare and smiled. I'm fine, Cadence.
If you're sure.
She sounded unconvinced, but nevertheless chose to return her attention to watchful eye and foresight.
Tsar, this is my...
We met a few weeks ago, princess.
Watchful eye interrupted.
But I do appreciate your effort to introduce us. Captain Armor, I am glad that I find you in good health. My sons and I were very concerned when we read about your confrontations in the newspaper.
Shining nodded gracefully, as was expected, though he knew that at least one of Tsar's sons was the source of his own wounds in the first place. We've nearly wrapped up the case. We've caught Masquerade, thanks to the princess, so all that's left is to figure out who hired her.
Be careful with her, Shining Armor. She can be dangerous even within the cage. She slipped between my hooves once in the past.
We are taking every precaution, Tsar, Believe me when I say I have no intention in having to fight her again. Kanan spoke up rather suddenly.
Why don't we talk about something more peaceful? Sir, Forsyth, how is Stalingrad these days? I haven't been since I was a filly.
Just the same as it had been a few thousand years, Forsyth answered with a smile. Nothing really changes at home. I confess I have much more interest in your new home, Princess. I am something of a student of magical history, and I was fascinated to hear that the Crystal Empire had returned from the mists of the past.
Well, to be honest, with King Sombra out of the way, it wasn't a true empire anymore. Soon, we'll be just a crystal domain.
And you shall have a seat on the stable of nobles, the Tsar observed. Forgive me if I seem crude in this, but I had been hoping you might replace your father instead. Our meetings could do with more of your gentle touch.
Shining nodded in agreement. Recalling the horrors of that small room and the noble police within, Cadence laughed gently at the two stallions.
I'd be the first to admit my father could be overbearing, but he means well.
The Tsar spoke firm in agreement to the larger alicorn.
We must hope, so do all members of the stable. Still, I confess in surprise at hearing your empire might well become the ninth domain of Equestria. Was Saudi Arabia not in pursuit of that position? I may be mistaken, but Forsyth began, but my understanding is that Saudi Arabia's southern lands are still contested by War Chief Kagan of the Boers. I assume Princess Celestia does not risk conflict and bloodshed by posing a formal claim to that land, even if the Tuscarad has left the Boers a little position to fight a war. Tell me, Princess, am I right?
Shining and Cadence whirled to find not one, but both ruling princesses of Equestria imparting in perfect silence. The elder met Forsyth's gaze and offered him a slight nod.
It isn't simply a matter of whether we could defeat the Boers with violence, though, my little pony. I have no intention to see bloodshed at all if I can avoid it. We have already seen the passing of too many guards' ponies, but forgive my interruption. It's probably better that you did, Princess, Cadence answered. We were going dangerously close to discussing politics.
'Tis better, then, that we saved thee from such a cruel fate. Luna spoke in a straightforward tone, missing the subtle humor of the comment completely.
So there are a few matters I wish to discuss with you, but if a moment could be spared...
Certainly, Princess,
the Tsar answered. As the pair of alicorns walked away, Cadence called out the larger mare.
What you said for Morningstar was beautiful, Princess.
Nay, 'twas shameful. My words were meant for comfort, and yet instead they caused pain as they often do.
Some day I will learn silence.
Luna strode away, leaving 4 ponies behind. Wow, Shining muttered.
Is she all right? She will in time. And with a few kind words. I do not look forward to the less kind words that I must share with others. It seems that my honor guard are unwilling to forgive her past, and their new leader has a matter of his own that we must address.
A quick diplomatic smile graced her lips, trying to do away with grim subjects.
This is not the time for that sort of talk, Phil. I had merely come to see that you were handling the passing of your friends well.
With that, the eldest of all the ponies walked away with her steady gait. 3 remained behind. They simply sat in silence for some time before Cadence once more broke the ice.
If it isn't too much trouble, Forsyth, do you know what business your father has with Princess Luna? I don't mean to pry, really, but it seems like something more than just this feast was bothering her.
Well, let me answer the question to which you really mean to ask.
Forsyth turned to the distant edge of the gathering, where Luna and Watchful Eye were quietly addressing one another.
I do not know what is bothering the princess. It is not the funeral, however. Princess Luna did not have any attachment to the commander in the same way Celestia did. Point in fact, he despised her utterly, though I do not know why.
Shining was stunned by the admission. Wait, the commander
reflected his subordinates, only more so.
I am not going to pretend that he is a hero the way my father and brother do. Perhaps it is true we would have lost the revolution without him, but he was just as much of a blunt instrument as red ink. The only difference seemed to be that my brother seeks out conflict and derives enjoyment from it. Forsyth turned back to the empty stage. My father is a reformer, an idealist. My brother is a warrior. They share both traits. But I am, to use a blunt term, a bureaucrat, and we did not see eye to eye on many a thing. I don't bother aspiring to greatness of fame. The silent gratitude that Stalingrad continues to run day after day is enough for me. That in my books. Which brings me back to Princess Cadence's question. Princess Luna is not troubled by her business with my father, but in all likelihood she is borrowing a book from our libraries. Doesn't the Canterlot Library have all the works she could ever need? If she wanted something written within the span of her reign, though I suspect that she might simply remember such a thing. My father maintains Stalingrad Castle, thus he has an informal sense of the librarian of its library. It is home to many of the ancient scrolls and treatises of the ancient unicorn kingdom, Unicornia, which predates the rule of the sisters. Sometimes father is even kind enough to allow me access to the old tomes and scrolls, though their age makes handling the parchment a risky endeavor. Wow, Kane said to her husband. Sounds like Twilight's paradise. You mean the better batik, to Lightnight's spoken. My sister. Ah, well, I hate to disappoint you, but father has kept the vaults and libraries sealed since we claimed the castle. Most of the books are likely mundane, but there is dangerous magic to be found in the scrolls under the castle. Father's predecessor, Baron Frostbite, made use of it. We do not want to risk a rogue maid, so only father has access. As I said, he is kind when he permits me to even read simple scrolls. On that matter, actually, I have requests for you two. Shining turned to his head. Go ahead. Would you allow me to pursue the library of the Crystal Empire? I have been hoping for it to for years since it reappeared, but my time has been in presence in Stalingrad until recently. I don't see why you need to ask, Shining asked archly. It is a public library. Shining Forsyth cocked his head in confusion before his eyes widened. Even with Samba's records, or are those kept somewhere else? He stopped, scratching the back of his head with a hoof. I'm sorry, that most likely made me quite suspicious. My interest in the climate magic that protects the capital from snow. It would be very beneficial to Stalingrad, as you can imagine. Of course, Shining answered, seeing Stalingrad diplomat historian growing flustered and nervous under his own words. Actually, you're welcome to join Cadence and I. We're heading north tonight. Really? Forsyth's nervousness tumbled away, replaced by subdued excitement. Thank you very much. I'll inform my father and make arrangement. Cadence and Shining watched the pony wander off, as they found themselves recalling where they were and why they had gathered there. Rainbow sat in front of Discord, simply because he was far away from where any pony might come to speak with her. She didn't bother touching the statue, for she had no more desire to hear his voice than any of her own friends. She simply sat there, staring at the tortured look of the Dracoclus. It didn't take long for her solitude to be interrupted again by a pair of soft but steady wings.
Rainbow, I just...
Fluttershy? Rainbow let out a little growl as she rolled her eyes. What do you want?
I didn't mean to hurt your feelings earlier, but...
Just stopped! Rainbow turned back to Discord and sighed. I'm sorry, Sai. I thought I was over him. But he just keeps coming back, doesn't he? The butter-yellow Pegasus sat down beside her friend and gave her a gentle hug.
I'm sorry, Rainbow, but it might help if you talked about it, instead of keeping it to yourself.
The mare rolled her eyes, but her reluctance was bested by the warm foreleg wrapped around her shoulders. Well, when I was really little, we didn't know what had happened to him. He had left before I had even turned 1. Fluttershy stared in Rainbow's sorrow.
That must have been awful. Do you remember anything about him?
It took the braver of the two Pegasi a moment to build up her courage. All I remember of him is his voice, singing to me. Otherwise, all I've seen is pictures. The mayor shrugged, trying to get rid of Fluttershy's memories for like all at once. The bearer of kindness refused to.
And then he ran away and joined the guard?
He was already a guards pony before I was even born, but he was supposed to have retired. When he left, Mom started telling me it was because of the war, that he'd come back someday. Rainbow's eyes squinted for a moment, to try to keep him as dry as possible. When she dying, she kept asking me and Papa, asking me if and Grandpapa if he ever come home. Fluttershy did not interrupt with hers, but her hug squeezed tighter as the story grew more difficult for Rainbow. Papa didn't want to get my hopes up. He warned me that my dad might have died, but Gilda told me something different. She said he just didn't care, and that he'd probably run off to get away from the responsibility. The first of tears leaked down Rainbow's face. I almost believed her, until Papa got a letter, and then I finally thought I knew. Dad had died. He left Mom alone and died, and that was it. I was mad at him so much for that. It took me so long to get over it, but I finally did.
And then all of this.
Fluttershy's sigh ended in a tighter embrace steel, bringing both her wings into the hug as well as her forelegs.
I am so sorry, Rainbow.
It was just so much easier than thinking she had died. But to find out now that Gilda was right, he was the commander the entire time. Rainbow shook her head as Fluttershy moved her again. I'll survive, she muttered in spite of Celestia's warnings. I always do, right? The words were accompanied by a small grin, meant more to cheer up her friend than to honestly indicate Rainbow's own well-being. Just give me a while to sit, and I'll be fine, okay?
Okay, Rainbow. If that's what you want. If it wasn't fair of him to keep that a secret from you.
As the Pegasi wandered off into their own directions, neither heard the silent laugh that issued forth from the strange statue that they left behind. Oh, Rainbow Dash. The commander was really your father. You can't even begin to imagine the things I could do with that.
My faithful student, is there something wrong?
Twilight Sparkle approached Celestia, then sat down on the grass in her black dress. Rarity might have screamed at the misuse of the fabric, but Twilight honestly intended to disintegrate the garment as soon as the funeral was done. It had been designed for Rainbow's funeral, and that came with too many awful memories.
A lot of things are wrong, Princess.
Celestia's brow rose in concern as she took a seat beside her student. Together, the two stared off at the statues of the garden as they spoke.
Tell me, what has been going on in your life, Twilight? How are your studies?
Twilight looked up at Celestia, who tipped her head as if urging to speak.
Well, if that's what you think we should talk about. My thesis is set up, though I haven't touched it in a few weeks. I need to, well, this sounds awful, but find a control group. Meaning some pony who doesn't have any friends.
Celestia seemed contemplative for a moment, and then spoke suddenly.
I'm sorry, Twilight. Please hold a moment.
Celestia closed her eyes, though a dim golden glow escaped from beneath her lids. Twilight had seen the process before, though never from so close. It lasted all of a minute, but when it stopped, Celestia seemed somewhat drained.
The Summerlands?
Yes. Celestia nodded.
A guards pony from Les Pegasus. Please forgive the interruption. You had something you wanted to say. I wanted to talk about Rainbow, Princess.
Celestia shuddering as if suppressing the urge to rise, but nevertheless managed to hesitantly nod, as if providing permission for Twilight to continue.
She's been acting odd lately, always wanting time alone. I know you said that you had her.
The words trailed off hardly, before a shake of her head restored Twilight's resolve.
You know, anyway, you said that it wouldn't be a concern for at least a few months. It might be something else that's bothering her, but that's the problem, Princess. I just can't figure anything out.
Hesitation filled Celestia's voice.
It may very well be something that happened in her journey, Twilight. Unless he tells you what is wrong, I don't think there is much that you or I can do to help.
Twilight's face scrunched up in a particular manner that denoted deep thought. It remained that way for all of 5 seconds before deflating an exasperated groan.
I just wish there was something I could do to make things better. My magic doesn't seem like much use here.
Celestia extended a wing, wrapping it around her student's shoulders.
Perhaps there is something to be learned from this. Let's see.
The princess paused in thought.
Dear Twilight Sparkle, today I learned an incredibly important lesson about friendship. I was worried about my sister, and I tried to do my best to fix everything with magic. Unfortunately, sometimes magic isn't the right answer. Sometimes it can make things worse instead of better. I hurt some pony who hadn't done anything wrong, because I thought I was strong enough to simply make the problem go away with a thought and a spell. Though things turned out well, they did so in spite of my magic, rather than because of it. But Princess, if Rainbow...
A gold-shot hoof was elevated to produce silence.
Luna didn't need to come back. She would have been happy. Equestria would have survived. I had to have her back because I was selfish. I couldn't stand to be alone. Now she is here again, suffering for my sake. So the lesson I learned is that magic isn't always the answer. Sometimes the only magic that can solve our problems is friendship. For once, your faithful student, Princess Celestia.
Epilogue 3. Final chapter. Moving on. Heartwarming Day fell on December 18th that year. After the glorious candlelight pageant of the previous night, silence seemed a welcome thing. There was a brisk chill to the air, and the soft snowflakes falling through the air set a perfect scene for cuddling with family in front of a roaring fire. Rainbow Dash knew little of those fires, or the comforting embrace of the wings. It had been so many years since he was in Cloudsdale for Heartwarming that she couldn't even remember how the cloud of Seam looked beneath a layer of snow until it was right beneath her. She alighted on the cloud sidewalk in front of the building. All the while, her eyes followed the little families and couples that made their way inside for the Wonderbolt show. Watching them go by, she felt once more a sensation that had dominated her life since her return from Sabrika. She was the odd mare out, set apart by random circumstance and fate. In this crowd, it had nothing to do with friends worried for her soul, or the sorrowful absence of a mentor. Instead, Rainbow was marked apart because she was alone. No mother or father to spread a wing over her back. No stallion or mare to hold her cloud and share in the heat of welcome bodies. No pony at all. A single blue ticket decorated with a bolt of yellow lightning slid free from her jacket pocket and was easily pinned beneath her wing. She walked up to the line entering the building and presented it without a word. A quick rip, and only a tattered stud remained.
"Back seats on Heartswoman. You got friends, kid."
Rainbow shrugged as the stallion mentioned her to a pass. Even after 15 years, she still knew the path by heart. Turn right past the concession stands, grab a free candy cane from the mare at the orphanage charity stand, drop 3 bits in the little can, right again, and up the stairs, then all the way around the round structure to reach the big rooms. Fancy walls of transparent cloud rather than glass permitted for heat for the plush seats and couches within. Rainbow knew every room. She helped to build them. Of course, that had been a 10-year-old filly who probably spent more time getting caught under hoof than actually moving the project along. Still, for her, it had been heaven in its own way. She moved up to the door and found it unlocked already. A simple push was all that it took to enter. Inside, the clouds had been colored and arranged in a glorious Wonderbolt theme. 6 bottles of gourmet root beer were arranged in a diamond on a nearby countertop, separating the seating area from a minibar stacked with all manners of drinks. She ignored the subtle offer had once been her favorite beverage, and wandered toward the seats. Rainbow wasn't sure what she had been expecting, but it had been something. Anything! Instead, the seats were empty. 3 opulent cushions played host to nothing more than the memories of happier ponies in better years. The disappointment was nearly palpable. A raucous voice came from over the loudspeaker.
"Fillies and gentlecoats, welcome to the Colosseum."
The crowd roared in response, and when they settled, the stallion continued. I hope you're all having a wonderful, heartwarming day so far, but I promise it's about to get better. Without further ado, I present the Wonderbolts!
The roar came again from the crowd, but Rainbow could not bring herself to join in. For just a moment, she glanced back at the door. The thought of leaving and abandoning the show was tempting for perhaps the first time in her life. In the end, she collapsed in a plush cloud seat, unsure of why she had done so. It only felt right.
Today, for your pleasure, we have Fleetfoot!
The roar of the crowd was deafening, though Rainbow could hear the whistling of wings through the frigid air over the noise.
Rapid Fire!
Again the crowd roared. Without even thinking, she identified the performing members as the Wonderbolts' first team. The announcer spoke up. She joined them. Gale Force. She mumbled her words, matched the voice of the speakers perfectly. Soren and Spitfire. I see you know your Wonderbolts, ma'am. Rainbow jumped at the surprisingly close origin of the voice and turned toward it. Though a stallion, it wasn't who she was expecting. A faded green stallion in a blue formal shirt balanced on a round silver platter on his wing. He offered it to her hesitantly.
I was asked to deliver this to you. It seems that you have an admirer.
Rainbow nodded, gesturing to the little end table placed near a seat in the opposite box. The stallion set the tray down and began to immediately make his way back to the door.
Happy housewarming.
You too, Des answered rather flatly. Her eyes were locked on the contents of the tray. A tall, slender milkshake glass played home to a root beer float, decorated with a vibrant peppermint stick. A faded foam hoof proclaimed support for the Wonderbolt's Captain Wedge. A tiny envelope completed the assembly. Clean, sparse script spelled out her name across the otherwise blank face. Her hoof dragged the envelope open first. 2 papers spilled out onto the silver and cloud. One was a carefully folded letter on common paper. The other was smaller, stiffer. Thin cardstock decorated with a glossy sheen proclaimed the words Rainbow recognized almost immediately. Quintilla, Captain Spitfire, starts at Fleetfoot, 15 bits. Redeemed only at the main counter.
Now that we've introduced the main team, it's time to see some flying!
Rainbow's eyes shot up from the betting ticket to see if all 5 Wonderbolts screamed by outside her window in a perfect wedge. The trails of smoke and the scream of wing over their wings sent an old thrill through her heart. A little smile wound its way onto her lips as she watched the mostly familiar performance. Most Wonderbolt shows were brimming with new maneuvers and daunting stunts, but the heartwarming routine was a classic too precious to be tempered with. Her hoof reached out to her side without really thinking. The root beer float came back to her, permitting a soft sip. Though the flavor of a peppermint didn't mix well with the rich taste of soda, it did harken back to the sweet tooth of a 5-year-old filly who couldn't bring herself to care about the conflict of sensations. The foam hoof was surprisingly old for a disposable item. She couldn't help but wonder where it came from, or how it had been dug up. The name it recorded belonged to a retired pony, who led the legendary team when Spitfire was barely a recruit. Captain Wedge was a legend amongst fires, though his days racing through the clouds were over. The thought of an old Pegasus giving up seemed strange in the memory of reckoning. She tossed away the sorrowful thought and turned her eyes back toward the show. The 4 Edge Flyers had peeled away from Spitfire, leaving the leader alone as she shot straight up into the air over the Colosseum. What would follow was a trick known only to a rare few even amongst the Wonderbolt's ranks. The skull dive consisted of a powerful straight downward toward a solid plate of fortified cloud, or in other venues, stone. The performer would spin as they dove, producing enough raw G's to send even the most hardened flyer to unconsciousness. Then, at the last second, instead of pulling up, the daring mare or stallion would literally stop, snapping to even a hover a mere inches from their death. In a sense, it was a magic trick, rather than something to impress the audience, which was easier to understand. Its attraction lay in its mystery. As a filly, Rainbow had spent years wondering just how it was done. There was a subtle crack in air as Spitfire's brilliant orange mane began to slice through the wind just ahead of her wings. Though it wasn't sonic, the sound bare no less weight.
Rainbow's eyes peeled highly as she watched, wondering at the possibilities. Yet, for all the years she had passed, one thing remained the same. Spitfire's wings snapped out at the last possible second, and Equestria's fastest flyer was still at a loss in how the trick was done. Rainbow? The mayor froze at the sound of the familiar voice. It was tired and old, as he hadn't heard in years.
Papa?
It took her a moment to build up the will to turn around and look at him. Silver Lining sat rather sheepishly in the doorway to the seating box, his eyes locked on the floor midway between himself and his granddaughter. It's been too long, Rainbow. His words were cut off by the tight embrace of a younger mare.
I missed you.
He stiffened for a moment, then his warm breath and bushy mustache both brushed past her ear. She moved a step away, but held her tight. I almost didn't come. Rather than bother with words, Rainbow nuzzled inside of his neck.
Why not?
At the question, the older stallion released his granddaughter and found himself staring at her hooves, unable to look at her in the eye. I was afraid you wouldn't want to come see me.
Well, that was dumb, Papa.
They both shared a soft laugh. Then Rainbow gestured toward one of the puffy cloud seats her grandfather had no doubt built of his own hooves.
Come on!
Silver Lining removed his expensive gray jacket, revealing both his naturally gray coat and the puffy silver-white clouds that marked his special talent. The garment was placed gently on a firm cloud rack, alongside his muted red scarf. Finally ready, he sat down beside his granddaughter and stared at the wonderbolts. Did I bet right for the race? You could have gone for the exacta, Rainbow answered calmly. Spitfire never loses these days. You could beat her, Silver Lining responded.
Well, actually I did, a few years ago.
A sudden grip clanged down his heart as she turned toward her grandfather.
The best young flyers competition? I've been there every year since you left, hoping to see you. I was there when you did the side Rainbow. I couldn't believe it. Why didn't you come see me? Why didn't you say anything?
Silver shook his head slowly.
You were with your friends, and the Wonderbolts, and the princess. I didn't feel like I had any place intruding on your life. And what if I want you to be a part of my life?
Beneath his mustache, Shining wore an enormous grin. Then you got me. The grandfather turned back to his jacket, and a little happiness faded. I've got something for you, by the way. He rose, and with both his neck and wing, produced a surprisingly large box from the folds of his coat. It was polished wood, at least 2 feet wide and half as tall. Though it lacked any sort of wrapping, its purpose was obvious as he set it on this little side table beside Rainbow's root beer float and a huge foam hoof.
What's in that?
Something I always meant to give you when you grew up, if you ever cared. I heard you joined the Guard, Rainbow, so I figured now was the time. He opened the lid, revealing 2 rows of radiant, glimmering metals and colorful ribbons. They lay between a scroll and rather plain but sturdy knife. These were your father's. I know what you think about him and what he did to you, but it was time you had them. Rainbow placed a hoof, closed the box, and shook her head.
It wasn't about me, Papa. It was about Mom, and I'm not with the Guard. It was just for a little while, just a week.
I'm glad to hear that, Rainbow, but these are still yours. He shut the box and set it on the ground beside her seat. It took a moment for his eyes to return to the show going on outside their window. Maybe we should talk about something better. Remember when we used to come to these shows? You always knew who was going to win. Rainbow nodded.
I was too young to bet, but you always brought me tickets anyway. Then I'd tell you about all the moves and all the flyer signature tricks from the cards you kept buying me.
And you asked me to teach you how to fly. It really has been a long time since I knew anything about flying that you didn't.
She looked down in the eye and smiled. Let's go, Papa.
What?
Rainbow hopped into her hooves. Flying! You and me, like when I was little. Come on!
Silver Lining was shocked. You want to leave a Wonderbolt show before it's over? What did you do to my Rainbow Dash?
Papa, I can outfly the whole team now. Hey, it won't be long before I'm out there myself. I know you never really liked sitting through these shows, so come on!
Rainbow found herself waiting as Silver Lining pulled on his scarf and jacket. Neither her grandfather
Father's slow and steady movement, nor the wing he put over her shoulder to pull her close, had changed in the year since he spoke. You're wrong, Rainbow. Maybe I never really cared about the team of stunts, but seeing you smile made me the happiest pony in Equestria. As the ponies walked out of the cloud of sebum and into the gentle snow of Cloudsdale, Rainbow nuzzled her father's neck. Happy Heartswarming, Papa. Heartswarming Day fell on April 18th that year, and it could not have come on a more beautiful morning. Though the air was brisk and chilled atop the mountain of dawn, loving families within their homes had no concern for the chill or snow. One small family was wrapped in a warm living room, seated on couches and chairs around a roaring hearth. 5 ponies smiled at each other over warm cocoa and eggnog, soaking up every minute of pleasant conversation. So, Shining, what happened to your shoulder? Nightlight asked his son, taking notice of the subtle white bandage that nearly blended wind with the stallion's fur. Just something from work, Shining answered, placing a gentle hoof on the itchy wound. He saw no reason to trouble his family with how deep the wound had cut, or how close it had come to stealing away his life. You have been busy, haven't you, Shining? His mother, Twilight Velvet Press. The Crystal Empire and the God? I have to wonder how you do it. The stallion shrugged, before wincing slightly at the motion of his shoulder. His head ducked to the side, nuzzling Cadence briefly. I've been busy enough dealing with the guard. She's the one doing all the real work of running the Empire. Oh, it's not so bad. Pretty soon it won't even be an empire anymore. Just another domain of Equestria. I have plenty of ponies helping me out, too. Cadence smiled at her in-laws as her magic set about distributing the presents from beside the fireplace into convenient piles for the recipients. Why, just a few weeks ago, the Tsar of Stalingrad and his son left. The accountants and bookkeepers tell me foresight was incredibly helpful in accounting for the thousands of years they were missing. Oh my. Nightlight began, suppressing a chuckle, perhaps the most boring description of a pony in the world. Sounds like your kind of stallion, Twilight. Maybe you should try and meet him. The younger Twilight rolled her eyes at her father and shook her head. If he's anything like his younger brother, I'm not sure I want anything to do with him that way. She and Shining shared a brief but knowing glance. And really, I appreciate it if you didn't try and drop hints about my love life, Dad. Oh, come on, Twilight. He's only teasing. Cadence turned from her sister-in-law to her husband and smiled softly. They already got one of their kids married. No reason to worry now. The little peck on Shining's nose was appreciated, but the awkwardness of anything more intimate in his parents' presence caused the bold guards pony to address him. Dad, why don't you start? You're the oldest. Well, I never... He responded with obvious humor, before his magic began to gently undo the wrapping paper. The object from within shifted gently to his presser, curling and bending like fabric. Who's it from, dear? Twilight Velvet encouraged with a less than subtle nudge to her husband. Who cares, dear? It'll probably be obvious anyway. I have to guess it's from Shining and Cadence since it clearly isn't a... He tore his post away to reveal the last paper, to reveal a book. The younger Twilight placed a hoof over her lips to conceal a slight laugh. I studied some illusion spells to help Shining on a case this summer, and I figured I'd make use of them. Always our little maids, I answered with a proud smile. Arts maids in a few months, if what I hear is true. What book is it? The stallion levitated a pair of glasses onto his nose and squinted down at the spine of the book. A Traveler's Guide to Bitterly, Trondheim, and Prince. Thank you very much, Twilight. Just wait till Mom opens hers, Twilight answered. Clearly excited, Velvet grabbed the envelope sitting atop of a long box in front of her. It opened with barely any effort, revealing a pair of glossed-over paper slip. Are these airship tickets? For your 35th, Twilight answered. There are hotel reservations and a few other goodies to go with them. Shining Piston, too. The guard's pony answered her with a wink, keeping quiet the truth that he had covered more than 3/4 of the cost himself. The salary of a librarian was, after all, not much in comparison to that of a royal guard captain and co-regent to an empire. You really shouldn't have... Please, Mom, we wanted to.
Shining smiled, before his attention was stolen by a knock from the door.
I'll get it,
Cadence answered, hopping up with help from her wings before any pony else could react. Shining couldn't help but watch her wander off toward the front door of the Canterlot home. Only when she was out of eyesight did he turn back to the Pegasus. He had chosen a long tin box from his parents, pulled it over to the couch when Cadence called out from the door.
It's for you, Shining. One of your guards.
Shining grumbled incomprehensibly as he rose from his seats. Better not have to do with running down alleys on hearts-warming. His magic lifted his helmet and caressed from their place on the armor mannequin kept beside the door, so both clattered on the floor when he saw who was waiting for him.
Hey, Shining.
The mayor's voice was hoarse, but her smile was genuine. Cadence, go back in. I won't be long. The unicorn let his wife pass, and then welcomed the guard's pony mare into his entryway. Her coat and mane were both cropped incredibly short, and beneath their color he could see the raw red and char black of painful burns. A coat of rather rough wool covered her body from the cold, but her wings sticking out the sides clearly showed a shortage of healthy feathers. She glanced over his house with a sort of awe.
They pay you guards ponies this good. Why didn't you just buy me a new wagon?
Maybe I like your company. Shining answered with a soft but gentle smile. What are you doing here, going solo?
She shook her head. You say that like you weren't happy to see me. Don't worry. I won't take long. The doctors just let me out. Said I was finally fit to walk again. Even if it takes a month or so for my wings to get back. They call it a heartwarming present.
It's good to see you're okay, Shining responded.
Well, mostly. There are a few places on my belly where the coat won't grow back, but that's the worst of it. They said I had you to thank, so that's why I'm here.
Then, to Shining's horror, she leaned up to his face and kissed him straight on the lips.
Thanks.
Solo, you can't!
I know,
she answered, turning back to the door.
That's why I had to, just once. I figure I'll head out of Canterlot. Maybe find myself someplace over the ocean. They say Prince is nice in the winters.
So you're just going to go back? The guard's pony asked, selling on the streets.
It's what I do, Shining.
The mare shook her head.
What else do I have?
You make a great guard's pony, Shining answered. Solo turned with a confused glance.
You're joking, right? I can't really fight, and I almost got you killed.
Fighting isn't what makes a good guard's pony, Solo. It's about in here. Shining's hoof tapped the center of her chest, gently to spare her any pain. And you've got more of it than most recruits I've ever met. I could teach fighting, and detective work, and whatever else you need, but I can't teach that. She shook her head slowly.
I don't think it's for me, Shining. I should get going. The train for Trottingham leaves in a few minutes.
She turned and made halfway out the door when Shining's sight found him forced to speak up. You're sure about that, Solo? She paused briefly.
Yeah, why?
I never saw it under your vest before, but your kitty mark says otherwise. She glanced back at the black spade symbol displayed point out within the fur of her back flank.
Maybe staring at my good side has you confused, Silent. My special talent is making stupid gambles. You already know my story. It hasn't worked out for me so far.
I don't think so. Shining stepped forward, walking out the door until he was standing shoulder to shoulder with the mare. I think it says you were born to be a guard's pony's partner. His magic tugged the amphibious helmet out into the cold, and from within the brim, he produced a pair of playing cards, Ace of Diamonds and Ace of Spades. My friend Mark Down and I ran off with these from a casino in Naples when we were still in recruit. We kept them in our helmets for good luck. He replaced the Ace of Diamonds within his own helmet, but held out his pair to the young mare. We were partners for as long as we had them.
You want me to have this?
Call it a heartwarming present, Shining answered.
I could see how you hooked a battalion princess, Solo laughed. Fine. All right. Give me 2 more good reasons why I should join up with the Royal Guard.
Shining paused for a moment in thought, then turned back to his home. Because then you could spend heartwarming here with me instead of on a train alone. And because I still have that bottle of Shetland Scotch you made me pay for in August. Without a word, Going Solo allowed herself to be ushered into Shining Armor's house. The guard's pony shut the door on the frigid December morning and accompanied his newest recruit to meet his family, grateful for the hard-won peace and the precious company. The end.
Oh, this fic! Yeah. If you ever had doubts of Shining Armor as a character, or just went through a fic where you're starting thinking to yourself, now, just why is the Guard's point? And you really want to prove it to another person of how the Royal Guard could be used in a good fic? I direct them to this! This story was just that good. I mean, yeah. It's going to have some problems. But, however, some of the developments and some of the stuff that are present here are mere just foreshadowing for Act 2 that's currently in progress right now. But for the rest, golly, I love every moment of it. I mean, I love how the foreshadowing or some of the secrets are kept. Like, say, this identity of Rainbow's father. Or some of Reckoning's past. The OCs were pretty dang good. Each one of them had their own individual personalities and morals and reasonings for being who they were that they actually kind of felt it right in these type of scenarios. Grizzaloo, Going Solo, they felt perfect for Shining Armor's entire detective noir / police story. And that's what Shining Armor's story felt like, was a police story. With the good-hearted cop knowing what he's doing, and then we have the new rookie playing by the rules. Intimidation factor. And yet, for as jerky as Red Ink was, I could see where he was coming from because of how he was raised in some of his scenarios. You know, in a way, this almost feels... Okay, there's an Arnold Schwarzenegger movie where he teamed up with Danny DeVito. Read something, I completely forgot, but Arnold Schwarzenegger plays a Russian cop in there, and Danny DeVito plays an American cop, and their two styles don't exactly mesh. If you added a little more camaraderie to Shining and Red Ink's situation, that's what it would have been like. And of course, Dead Reckoning was a pretty badass OC himself. I would complain about the Honor Guard's lack of faith in Luna, but then I realized that, yeah, it makes perfect sense because, oh my gosh, we just got this new princess in here, and, oh look, she kills one of us! Perfectly reasonable. And the plot gives us a reason to know why they wouldn't trust Luna, why they would hate her. Also, I like the fact that we see Celestia as some of her most human. Not triangle and not exactly evil. I disagree with her when she tries to say that I'm making my sister suffer and I was being selfish. Yeah, you were being selfish, but for good cause. You can try to say that Equestria would be safe all you want, but I don't think she would have made it. I think the moment that Luna died, Celestia would have gone off the deep end, and we would have had Nightmare Corona. But you did it to save your sister, because you didn't want to be alone, and nobody could disagree with that. I would never disagree with something like that. And also, Rainbow Dash is a strong pony. You picked the one mare who would probably be determined enough to tell Death, F you, and continue staying with there. And she did. I would have during a little bit of the time skip, I would have liked to see a little more scenes between Rainbow and the others, with the others building up Rainbow, but I'm guessing either Rainbow's already fixed that determination, or this is going to be something that's going to be cleared up more in Act 2. Still, there's a reason why I picked this fic. Because it is that good, and I'm genuinely hoping you all enjoyed sitting through this adventure with me. If there's two fics I want to be remembered for doing these live reads, is either Sweet Taste of Cake or this one. Or doing my Lunaverse series. Speaking of Lunaverse, join me next week where, Mr. Student? Dinky, you got me mixed up. When I'm on this channel, it's
martial art fruit user. Mr. Student is what I am when I write.
Oh, sorry. But can I do the next story preview? It's all about me and it talks about my mama and I was wondering.
Okay, Dinky. Take it away.
Okay, so next time on the Luniverse, it's Mother's Day and I'm going to buy a present for her. Wait, why is that? They're telling me I can't. And why is she so angry at Mama? Mom, why are you hiding? Trixie, I just can't tell her. It's too hard for me to say why I'm so disappointed in myself.
Next time on the Luniverse, Family Matters. I'll see you next time.